Feel free to shame me for not finishing these because there's quite a high list here. Hi, I'm Caitlin E, and welcome to the Lit Review. Today we are going to do part 2 of the unfinished series setup here. So this is going to be all about the adult series that I am stuck in the middle of, that I have not completed or finished progress. And again, I have already done a version of this video with my unfinished YA series. I will link that for you up above if you're interested. But today we're going to focus on anything that falls within adult genre. So I have a mix here of mystery, fantasy, romance, historical. It's a real mixed bag here. I'm not going to go in any particular order, but as with my YA series, I have a couple of limitations here. So I'm only looking at series that I have intent to continue with. So if I got like halfway through a series and decided not to finish it, that's okay. I can leave those unfinished. Others are I'm as caught up as I can be, but the next book hasn't come out yet. So it may technically be an unfinished series in the sense of publication, but I'm as caught up as I can be, so I'll be leaving those to the side. And then because I read a lot of romance novels as well, I did not count series that are technically connected, but that could be read as standalones, because there are a lot of those that I haven't read everything for, but I also don't feel compelled to read everything for them if this other standalone story isn't interesting to me. So I'm not gonna go through all of those either. So those are the limitations on these, but I promise you, even with all of those caveats, there's still a lot of books for us to go through today. A lot. First one I want to talk to you about is the Game Maker series by Kresley Cole. So this is her kind of mafia contemporary romance series. It is also a like BDSM or kink culture series that I really have enjoyed. I've read 2 of the 3 books, so this I don't even know if this is the first one, it's just I know this is one of the ones I've read. It's really interesting. The characters are funny and complex and interesting, and I just really enjoyed this from Kresley Cole, who also has done historical stuff, and her Urban Paranormal series is another one of my favorites. We will be talking about that later in this video. But I really enjoy this. I do not know why I haven't picked up the last book. I kind of just am a really big mood reader with my romance. So I have to kind of wait to be in the mood for some BDSM or kink culture stuff. But highly recommend these if you are interested in either mafia-style romances or BDSM. Very good smut. This video may actually encourage me to finish this trilogy. The Millennium series that was started by Stieg Larsson and has been continued on with by David Lagerkrantz, who is a mystery thriller writer in his own right. So I started reading the original Millennium series when it got crazy popular. I don't know why these books are like some of my all-time favorite. I don't read a ton of like mystery or thriller stuff, but when I do, it's probably this series. I really enjoy it. The pacing is really great and action-packed, and I just feel like there are pieces of the puzzle that I can figure out and then pieces that I never see coming, so it's really satisfying for me. I think David Lagerkrantz has done a really good job of maintaining the tone and integrity of the characters from Stieg Larsson's original trilogy. Would really like to complete these, and I think the original 3 books are still at my mom's house, so I need to pick those up from her. Sorry, Mom. Next we have another kind of paranormal romance, or I guess it's the first paranormal romance in this video. I say another because it's one of my favorite genres of romance, but that is the Black Dagger Brotherhood by J.R. Ward. I probably have been out of this series long enough that I need to just reboot and start from scratch and like refresh with the characters. This is the book that I stopped on. So this is Lover Unleashed. Good smut, good fun characters, like dark, gritty atmosphere. So then I am also stuck in the middle of Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. And part of that is because they're quite thick. So I usually, as much as I love Claire and Jamie and their whole saga, I usually need a break after finishing one of these, which is, why I've only read the first 2. I love it when I'm in the middle of reading these books. They're fantastic. Time travel is one of my favorite things in books. So the fact that this series is a historical romance with heavy time travel elements and espionage, it's just chef's kiss. It's so good. So I have read Outlander, this first book, Dragonfly and Amber, and then I have Voyager back here on my shelf to remind me that I would like to read it sometime soon. And I really like these big versions that are kind of floppy. So I have been specifically holding out and trying to find these in like used bookstores and getting the size right, because I have accidentally online purchased like the short, super thick versions, so I have to be really careful when I purchase these. But I would like to continue with the series. I know it is a kind of lengthy series at this point, but I do really enjoy it. Oh boy, another long-standing like urban paranormal romance series with really intense mythology is Sherilyn Kenyon's Dark Hunter series. Now, Sherilyn Kenyon's Dark Hunter series is vast, and it is still ongoing. It also interweaves with like, I think like Dream Hunter series, and I think there's another one that this also interweaves with. And not all of the books are really fantastic, especially as I have done rereads of them. So I'm actually in the middle of a reread of the series, even though you haven't seen that on my channel since it's, you know, been around in the last couple of months, because I was checking them all out physically from the library. I don't have all of them with me. Most of the ones I do own are in a box in my mother's basement. Again, sorry, Mom. But I've been rereading them through the library in physical form, and I just kind of need to get over that hurdle and start checking them out for the library so I can continue with this reread. And I'm only, I think, like 5 or 6 books in to what is essentially a 20-plus book series, and she's still writing these, so I got a lot of ground to cover. I may, you know, fall off the wagon again. I didn't plan to do this like aesthetic stacking of kind of like blue, red, blue, red, blue. That's gonna get mucked up in a minute, but it is nice. So this is one of the only historical books that I have on the list in terms of historical series. I guess Outlander is also kind of a historical series. So this is Kate Quinn's Empress of Rome series, and the first book in the series is Mistress of Rome. And this could kind of, again, fall into that category of standalone but connected, except the history is connected and the characters are interwoven to a point that it really does enhance your understanding of it if you read it in order. So I really like Kate Quinn's writing. She is very popular right now for things like The Huntress and the Alice Network, but she has also done these Roman Empire level historical fantasies that I think are kind of mixed. Like this first one, Mistress of Rome, I really loved. The second book in the series, I think, was a 2-star from me. So that's why I stopped, is because I was like, ooh, okay, I think this was like a 4. The second book was a 2. Where are we going with this? I believe there are 2 other books in the Empress of Rome series, but I do want to see it through eventually. I own 3 of them. I think I'm missing the 4th book. But I do recommend this series, at least for the Mistress of Rome. If you would like to just read them as standalones, I recommend this one. I'll see how I feel about the others, but yeah, that's kind of why I stopped. And I really do love reading historical fiction with some romance elements, because I can't resist a good romance in a book. And I really love reading like Roman Empire type books. So that's not something you've seen a lot from me thus far on this channel, but this is a great example of that kind of book. So the next book series that I am stuck in the middle of, I just kind of fell behind and never fully caught up. Again, this is another series that I was in the middle of a reread at my library in physical form, and then quarantine kind of put that to a halt, so I may pick it up again soon. But I do really love the portions of the series that I have read, and that is, again, Kresley Cole's Immortals After Dark series. So I didn't stop at McReeve, but this is one of the physical copies that I have here in my apartment. And I really love the Immortals After Dark series. It is fun, quirky, smutty. I really enjoy it. It is a really fun world building experience where like basically all the creatures of myth and legend are real. Basically, there's a lot of like political dynamics and alliances, faction against faction, and often people fall in love across these faction lines, and it's very good for the angst and emotional conflict. And, you know, it is a story that builds really well. So this is one that I would say is definitely not standalone fodder. You do get a better understanding of all of the complicated, large story arc dynamics if you read from the beginning. And they're fun. They're fun romances that are super smutty. There's even a spin-off series that is kind of related to the arc, to the main arc, but not deeply related. And so I have not read any of those yet, but they are kind of on my eternal to-do list. But I really love Kresley Cole's writing. As I've mentioned before, she's got a contemporary thing that's already on this stack, but love this. Love it. Okay, so the next two book series I'm going to talk to you about, I do not have physical copies of, so I will have to insert some covers as I do. And the first one is kind of embarrassing for me. I have stalled out in the middle of reading The Lord of the Rings. I have read the first book by audiobook. I've read The Hobbit, and then I've read The Lord of the Rings, or The Fellowship of the Rings. And I am stuck on Two Towers. I enjoy Tolkien's writing, and I'll enjoy his world building like no other. I really loved the movies. Those movies came out when I was like an adolescent, like not even fully a teenager yet, but I love them and I still rewatch them. Like I spent my New Year's Day rewatching the extended editions. They make me very happy. But I had never read the source text in full until a couple of years ago when I started listening to The Fellowship of the Ring on audiobook. Getting audiobooks for Tolkien's work that are unabridged is very difficult. In LA, there is only like one copy of these poor audiobooks. And so I have to order them through my library, and it's a bit of a struggle. I would very much like to complete them one day, but that is why I have not. So someday. And another one that I have just been checking out from the library and kind of just fell behind was the Demonica series by Larissa Ione. You may be able to just totally clock that I am a huge paranormal and paranormal urban fantasy reader. The Demonica series is exactly what it sounds like. There are different types of demonarchies that live in our world, and of course, where there be demons or vampires or whatever, there are always like the opposing force, the people who are hunting them down who think they're an abomination. So that is like the overall story arc of that one, where, you know, the conflict between demons that are not that bad and humans that may be terrible. The romance is really good. The characters are really fun. I like learning about the different types of like demons or creature types in this world building of Ione's, and I would really like to continue with this. I got about 2 books in and then just kind of put it out of my rotation. But one day I'd like to finish that. Okay, so this next one I'm not going to spend too much time talking about because I have spent a lot of time talking about it on my channel recently. You can check out my June wrap-up for my full thoughts on this, the first book. But I am in the middle of the Nevernight Chronicles by Jake Kristoff. I just finished Nevernight in June. I enjoyed it, but I have very complicated feelings about Kristoff as a writer and some of the stuff that goes on in this book. So I will keep it at that. I do have intent to continue on with the series. I own God's Grave. I do not own the third one, which title's escaping me. It's not that important right now. Ugh, Jay Kristoff ruining my very aesthetic blue and red stack. Rude. So this next book series that I'm going to talk about is one that's actually very near and dear to my heart. I am not caught up with it because it is still being published. Like, again, this is another like 20 plus book series that I just haven't caught up with and probably need to do a reread with at this point. I have reread the probably like first 15 books in this series so many times. They're just the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series by Laurel K. Hamilton. This is another series that I have some complex thoughts about. The early books in the series are a really interesting and engaging mix of like horror and romance and kind of detective elements as well. Because Anita Blake is a necromancer living in kind of an alternate universe where we as a culture in America acknowledge the existence of vampires and other types of creatures from myth and legend. And part of the reason I picked this book series up to begin with is because it's set in St. Louis, Missouri, and that is where I'm originally from. So part of what made these, especially the early books, hit so hard for me is that when she goes, Anita Blake is also a consultant for the police department in St. Louis to help solve supernatural crimes. and she goes to places, and Hamilton describes them with such detail that I was just like, oh, I know where that is, you know, like, so it really hit home for me. And I think most fans of the series would make the case that towards the middle of this very long series, it gets more smut than plot, which is not a bad thing per se. I still enjoyed that. But you start out these books with there being like horror, mystery, detective work, and a smidgen of sensuality and romance. And then that smidgen just like kept going to where it became the main point of those books. And I still love them for both of those components. I think Laurell K. Hamilton has got it back to a point where like in the middle it was like all smut all the time. And now it's like back to that mixed politics, mystery, horror. This is just kind of like, I will always have my nostalgia goggles on for these. But I really do love them and would love to continue. I think she's got a new book coming out in this series called Sucker Punch. And I entered a giveaway for it recently. So I am still deeply invested in this and would probably like to do a reread sometime soon and just catch up with the series. So let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that. This next book series is one that I feel really connected to, but have stalled out on reading the third book in the original trilogy, and that is Jacqueline Carey's Phaedra trilogy. The first book in this series is Kushiel's Dart, and this is kind of a medieval fantasy with really strong BDSM romance as well, because in this world that they've built, sensuality and the arts are really heavily part of the politics and the way that the world is constructed. And so Phaedra is considered like blessed by the gods because she has like this red mote in her eye. And that is supposed to be a signifier that she is blessed by Kushiel, who has a lot to do with pain and pleasure wrapped in pain. So she becomes this like courtesan who specializes in BDSM. She also ends up being a spy and an ambassador, and I've read the first two books in this trilogy. I haven't read the third, and then there is a kind of secondary trilogy where Phaedra is more of a secondary character, and it focuses on some of the like kids that you meet in the first book, and now they're adults. So I would really like to read that one as well. Again, I almost feel like it's been so long since I've read the first two that I need to reread the series in order to finish the trilogy. But I really did love it, and I just honestly think there are not many books in the fantasy space that have this really cool blend of romance and in a way that's balanced, because I feel like most often when we think about these types of books, they are either fantasy with a touch of romance or like romance with a touch of fantasy. I feel like this is a pretty fair blend, and I've constantly been trying to search for other books that are like this, and there's really nothing that does this quite as well as Jacqueline Carey's Phaedra trilogy. And these last two books that I'm going to talk to you about are kind of some heavy hitters in the fantasy genre overall. So I have read the first book in the series, the one I'm about to show you, but I have not read the second, and that is the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss, and the first book in that is The Name of the Wind. So I have read this one, this nice, beautiful, thick book, and I have not read A Wise Man's Fear. I enjoyed reading this. I would like to continue. Lord only knows when the third one's coming out, so I don't feel like I need to deeply prioritize the second book. But this follows Kvothe? Is that how you say his name? I've heard so many different ways of pronouncing that poor man's name, so I don't know. But he is our narrator, and he's somewhat of an unreliable narrator, which makes him very interesting. And so he is telling his own story about how he came to be both this really heavily famous sorcerer or like wizard type, and his quest through going to school, getting kicked out of school, quest for vengeance, and finding out what happened to his family. But when we meet him, he's like, he owns and operates a tavern under a different name. So like, we're still trying to figure out how we get there. And because he's telling this story to a chronicler, a kind of bard figure, it's really hard to figure out how much of this is like him valorizing himself versus fact or fiction. So like, there's that really fun dynamic there. I would very much like to continue with this series, but I'm not really sure how to best prioritize it. So then the last book that I have that's part of a series that I have not finished is also embarrassing. And it is The Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I was reading these around the time that the show came out, and I caught up really quickly. I enjoyed the multi-perspective. I really do love a multi-perspective novel. And Martin does that in all of his books through the Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire series. I read the first 3, and then season 3 came out around the time that I had just finished book 3, and I got so mad that the TV show changed so much that I was like, okay, I do enjoy the show. Let me pause on the books so that I can let the show finish its course, because the show's gonna finish before those books are finished, and boy howdy was I right about that. But I just didn't want, I wanted to enjoy the show for what it was and didn't want the existing books to sour the show for me. The show soured itself for me, so I really shouldn't have blamed the books for that. We're still not talking about season 8. I am still not over it. I may never be over it. So, again, this is another series that I probably need to start over with in order to fully commit to like what the book narrative is versus what the televised TV show version was. But I do remember really enjoying these and really liking the growth of characters over time. Again, this is a series. Lord only knows when or if Martin will finish them. So I don't know how to prioritize this either. So these are all the adult series that I am stuck in the middle of. I have made some varying degrees of progress on all of these, but I am still stuck. So please let me know in the comments below what you think I should prioritize, or if there's ones that I should probably start from scratch and like reread and you'd be interested in that, please let me know down in the comments. I feel really called out by myself by making this video, but hopefully that will be very productive shame and get me to catch back up with some of these series that I do really care a lot about. Like if they made it to this pile, it's because I enjoyed reading them and would like to continue reading them. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope you have a fantastic reading day. Like and subscribe if you'd like to know more about me or this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!